Thank you very much for this award and the wonderful citation. So it's a pleasure and honor to be here. Um, 3 years ago when I was here, I actually spoke about the first all-women rural BPO that I'd founded in 2010 and how the innovation sort of came about after me having been a banker and a management consultant. Now, after I founded that BPO and what I heard, I think 3 panels before this, there was this farmer and Bajjuji who actually spoke. And the farmer actually said the statement which I've had in my head for a long, long time. He says, the farmer suicides are nothing to do with agriculture, it's actually to do with politicians, which is true. To put it differently in a business language, parlance, I'd say the farmer suicides actually aren't an agricultural problem, it's a supply chain problem. And the root of that is that we need to start treating India as a producer's economy, not just as a consumer market, which is unfortunately what we've been doing all along. So after being a banker, there's a phenomenal sort of a journey that I undertook, and I ended up in Kedarnath where I found my guru. And that's when I really started to indulge more in Indian philosophy, which is actually not Indian philosophy, we call it Darshan Shastra. So Darshan is more about actually seeing, it's not just about debating. Unfortunately, philosophy is just acquisition of knowledge, and it happens to be only a bipolar, sort of a this, that, right, wrong, black, white, kind of a discourse. The philosophy we're talking about, Indian philosophy that's in our Vedas and the Shastras, that's actually darshan, which is about illumination, which is about actually seeing the truth, the reality for what it is. And so what ended up happening was I founded the first all-women rural BPO in a Jat village with Khap Panchayats in the state of Haryana, which is actually not known for, or rather in the media, it's not really known for women empowerment and the most liberal policies. But to my utter surprise, when I actually hit the ground in these villages, what I found was that the reality is completely different from what's been portrayed. So there's a movie called NH10 with Anushka Sharma, which would make you believe that, if you go to Haryana, the last mall that you cross, and then there's just, rapes and murders, which unfortunately is not true at all. It's probably one of the most friendliest states that I've come across. They still call me a Firangi. But what I learned more there is that unlike what's being portrayed, the women are far more enterprising, they're far more bold, they're far more risk-taking. And that's what ended up being a first all-women rural BPO. Now, I'm not going to go into details, but just to quickly touch upon it, the first all-women rural BPO in 2010 was actually powered, we didn't have electricity then, was powered from a theka, which is a liquor store, right? The first woman that actually got employed was only educated till 8th grade. And what really rang a bell in my head was that she was able to recite the keyboard after 4 hours of seeing a computer for the first time, and she'd only studied till 8th grade. So these are the things that so I sort of saw. And then the barrage of awards and recognition started to come through. And I ended up traveling a lot to different colleges, universities. And to my utter surprise, what shocked me was that every time I'd engage with youth, they'd ask me the same question, and I tried to explain to them, but they'd completely miss the point. Now, this is something that I'd go back to 2002 when I was at Wharton and in business strategy class, we were being taught this book, wonderful book called The Art of War, and the professor said, in the heat of the battle, you don't get emotional. And I thought that's a wonderful thought. It just somehow rings a bell, because funnily enough, my grandmother used to tell me when we were kids as well that karm kal phalki puja chitta mat kar. It says, Karmanya Vadika Raste Maphaleshu Kadachana. Which then got me thinking, this is great. So everybody's been telling me what to do, but nobody really tells me how to do it. So I engaged with the professor and I asked him, how do you not get emotionally attached? I've just spent like 200,000 on an MBA. I'm definitely emotionally attached to the BMW that I'm going to buy after MBA. So how do I not get emotionally attached? He tried and tried and tried, but unfortunately he failed. Now that's when I ended up going to the first ISKCON temple to buy my copy of Bhagavad Gita, and I read it cover to cover for the first time in about 2 weeks. And what intrigued me is that's probably one of the best books that I've ever read in life and business strategy. I'm not saying it because I'm Hindu, I'm not saying it because it's come out from India, but genuinely after all the reading that I've done, and then subsequently ended up going to the Himalayas, which is a totally different story. But what came out of it was, after you read this book, after you read Bhagavad Gita, it compels you to ask yourself 3 questions. And I usually ask this at different IITs, IIMs, different universities that I'm invited to speak at. And I ask the students, like, what does it ask you to ask yourself? And invariably, the three questions are, who am I? Where have I come from? Where am I going? And so people get, they said, this is all religious talk, let's not go there. I said, fine, let's not talk that. Let's say I want to go from here to the airport. What should I do? So invariably the answer is, well, pull out Google Maps. I said, fantastic. So what does Google Maps ask me? It asks you, where are you at, which is here at Renaissance Hotel. Where do you want to go, which is airport. And how are you going? It's got these icons. Are you on a camel? Are you on a car? Are you biking, walking, whatnot? So it's the same exact three questions, whether it's Bhagavad Gita or Baba Google. You don't really change those philosophical questions. The philosophy remains the same. The things start to go deeper, and maybe the states change. And that's what encouraged me to write my first book, which is Lost Wisdom of the Swastika. Now, the reason I even wrote that book is because of the demonization that's happened over the past 60 years. It was important for people to understand what that philosophy is. Why are symbols so important for us? Why is it that we need to understand the root of those symbols and what is it trying to convey to us? Unless we understand that, there's no point in us even debating on how we can innovate and how we can become a trillion-dollar economy. Now that's what gets me to a point where if I try to explain this simplistically, people get it, but like, okay, how does it make any difference to us? So essentially, a swastik is a four-state philosophy. Char avasthaon ki trigunaatmak prakriti. For people who don't understand Hindi, it's a four-state philosophy. Now, char avasthaon ki trigunaatmak prakriti is essentially the backbone of the entire discourse. And once you start understanding it, wo trigunaatmak prakriti hi har jagah hai, right? So I ask people, when you go to the temple or a mosque or a gurdwara, you take off your shoes. Why do you take off your shoes? And people really have, no idea. So some people say it's because, of respect. I said, okay, fantastic. If it's out of respect, would you take off your shoes when you meet your parents? They said, no. Do you take off your shoes when you meet your grandparents? They do. Of course, the answer is no. So does that mean you don't respect your grandparents or parents? Of course they do. So then what's the answer? Some people say it's because of cleanliness. We don't like to pollute. I said, okay, fantastic. Do you always take off your shoes when you go to a clean place? You don't, right? The answer is really in Trigunaatmak. It's a three-principled nature, right? Which is why we have Tamogun, Rajogun, and Satogun. Which is why you have Ganga, Jamuna, Saraswati. Which is why the essential nature in the entire Hindu philosophy, you get up in the morning, you do Surya Namaskar. In the evening, you do Chandra Namaskar. But then you take off your shoes to connect to the earth. Now, the whole idea of emotional detachment starts coming through when you actually connect yourself to the earth. That's something that you've completely forgotten. We get off the beds, we wear our slippers, go take a shower, come back and wear our shoes, and off we go. We are really connecting with the earth. Once you start connecting with that Trigunaatmak Prakriti is when you start to get it, right? And so people say, well, that's all esoteric. How does it make any sense in today's life? Well, it does. If you look at a plug point, it's got the same 3 points. It's got the positive, the negative, and earth. You're plugging your cell phone to charge your cell phone, and the cell phone is getting earth, but you're not earthing yourself. Which is where, it starts to intrigue people, but then they're still not ready to accept it. And that's something that, after the book I realized that, people are, sort of open to it now, but they don't have a way and a means to connect back to how we can tap this economy. Now, I'll just pause this here. I'll take you to a different plane. The British colonized India for 250 years, not 10 years, not 20 years, 250 years. And 70 years after that, we've had, it's unfortunate or fortunate that, here I am in the middle of a conference room which is, majority Indians. I'm speaking English. Of course, there are people who can't speak and understand Hindi. But the funny thing is, we think that, incidentally, I was invited to speak in New York in a Jewish lobby, and I asked these guys a question. I said, how many Indians do you think do not speak English? And most of them thought that every Indian speaks English. Now that's funny. I used to think, there was a huge percentage that actually spoke in English, but it's not. So after 250 years of colonization, 70 years of this education, the total percentage of English communicating population in India is less than 5%. That's after all this that we've had. The total penetration of life insurance industry in India, after 70 years of being here, and before independence, it was not acquired by LIC. They've spent in excess of $10 billion in marketing, lost in excess of $1 billion in net losses. The total penetration of life insurance industry in India is less than 3%. Now, when you start to understand that thing, एक किसान की ज़मीन की कीमत उसकी जान से ज़्यादा है. Essentially, a farmer's land is dearer to him than his life. So his wife would never invest money in life insurance. And this is where people miss out, right? How is it happening, right? Everyone is trying to, the life insurance industry, the bankers are trying to educate the masses. And this is where I disconnect. I said, you don't need to educate the masses. You actually need to get educated on the masses. You need to get educated on India, which is essentially what I'm trying to do now. If you understand the core philosophy, you start to engage the youth by making them curious, right? What they don't really get. Why is Tuesday a holiday in India, in a lot of small cities? Why people don't get their hair cut on a Tuesday? Why is the barber closed? Why are people not going to have chicken or meat on a Tuesday or a Saturday? These are essential questions which are not just mythical, they're not just belief systems, they're something that has been etched deep, and it's very, very scientific. There's a scientific temperament. Something that stayed on for like thousands of years is something that we need to start understanding, right? So just to give you a brief example, when people say they do critical thinking, I said, okay, great. Why is Tuesday Tuesday? Why are barbers closed on Tuesday? Why do people not eat meat on Tuesday? So their real floozy answer is, well, it's Hanumanji's day, it's a religious day. And I said, okay, but it's got to have a reason, right? Something that's sustained over such a long period of time and across the country, right? It's not just a UP phenomenon, it's across the country. I mean, you go to Chennai, it's the same thing. And people don't really know. So I said, ask a critical question. Why is Tuesday a Tuesday? Why is Tuesday not some other day? I mean, this is something that, Einstein asked you to observe it as Tuesday, it's not. The root of that is astrological, right? Which is Jyotish. Again, slightly different from astrology, but Jyotish is the root of it. The order of the weekdays is determined by the graha, which is revolving around the observer, which is, Parashar Rishi, who actually wrote about this. And the order of the weekdays is the speed of the graha that it's revolving at. So moon is the fastest, Mangal, which is Mars, is the second, Mercury is the third, and similarly it goes on. Now, if you go to an Indian temple, you take off your shoes, you connect with the earth, you go further, there's Navgrahas. Those Navgrahas are those 7 planets that the days are named after, which is Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. And then there's Rahu and Ketu, which we'll keep separate for now. Once you start getting it, the Varna system is also a part of that, right? So Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, it's actually the same person, it's just the different characteristics that come out of it. Mangal, which is Mars, is a Kshatriya. Now people know it. If you even go to lots of museums across the world, Mars is shown as a red warrior, which is essentially its symbolism, right? So what does a warrior do on its day? It rests, polishes his sword, rests his weapons. That's essentially what a barber is. That's essentially what a butcher shop is, right? That's the reason why you don't have it. Now, these are the economic bases, economic roots of how the economy is structured. Now, this is thousands of years old, and it will take some time for people to observe and understand it. I mean, similarly, on an Amavasya night, no milkman in the village actually sells milk. They all donate it to, they go and offer it to a Shivling. There's deep reasons behind it. We need to start understanding those reasons from a quadripolar, a multipolar perspective, so to say, than a bipolar perspective, which is a right, wrong, black, white, left, this and that. And start to understand for what it really is. But net, what I'd like to summarize with is that, this is an economy which I sort of look at, and a culture and a philosophy which is almost like a complex spacecraft. And unfortunately, we're trying to look at a tricycle's manual and trying to interpret on how it'll work. It won't, which is what's happened, right? And I've given you examples, the amount of English penetration, the kind of things that we've seen in life insurance industry does not make sense. The last point is, this economy is actually a faith-based economy. Now, faith is not religion. Faith is very different. If you've seen, cabs outside, the Ola and Uber cabs, they've got one deity on the back. And, some journalists call it a militant Hanuman, but I'd like to engage you on that. no matter how diverse India is, no matter how diverse we get in terms of languages, colors, food, habitat, everything, you travel 20, 30, 40 kilometers, but the deities remain the same. So Hanuman is actually one of the most popular deities. So when you actually go to a farmer and you ask them, would they invest in life insurance? They don't, but they are happy to go and make an offering to Hanuman because that's the faith that they go with, right? But that's essentially what I'm trying to do now. The book is now adopted in business schools as a reference book. There's a subject that we've formulated around it. It's called Kulhad economy, which is a metaphor for sustainability, because that's the problem that we are trying to address. Sustainability, in a sense, is getting back in tune with nature, which is essentially what we're doing to start with. I mean, that's essentially what the farmer in the panel before said. That's essentially what Bajju ji is also talking about. But there is already a defined system that we've got in which we can tune back into nature. Let's just try and tune back into it by understanding our deep roots, our philosophy, our culture, and go forward with it. But with that, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Ajay. Thanks.